Hello and welcome to Tech Chairs, the sports tech podcast. I'm Rebecca Hopkins, CEO of the STA Group.
And I'm Alex Dibble, a sports broadcaster who's worked with tech startups in sports and other sectors.
This season is all about finances and failure. We're speaking to sports tech entrepreneurs about the financial journeys they and their companies have been on, the highs, the lows, and the lessons. We hope these conversations are valuable in helping other entrepreneurs and anyone thinking of taking the plunge avoid dangerous pitfalls and set themselves up for commercial success.
This season of Tech Chairs is sponsored by Sports Tech HQ in Indiana. Sports Tech HQ, the home of sports, is building the largest cluster of sports technology companies in North America. In this industry, proximity matters. You want to be where the teams, leagues, and decision makers actually are. Indiana is home to dozens of sports organizations that rely on technology to run smarter, move faster, and stay competitive. Don't get lost in the noise. Build where the sports industry actually lives. Learn more at sthq.org.
Our guest for this episode is Trev Keane, the co-founder of Phoenix Group. Phoenix works in gaming, connecting global brands to Gen Z, or should that be Gen Z, and alpha audiences through immersive world experiences on platforms such as Roblox and in games like Formula E Electric Lap. Oh, Trev, thank you so much for joining us. Trev, you worked for 15 years in the fund management industry. What made you think, I've had enough, I'm jacking this in, the sports tech, the world of sports tech enterprise is calling me. I'm shifting industries.
Yeah, firstly, Rebecca, thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to our chat. Everybody when they're young has ambitions, and a path they want to go, and I guess in some way we're even though people don't think it, you're fueled by the decisions you make at a 15, 16, 17-year-old. And my passion was always sport, and finished my degree in accounting and finance, and from there I actually went on a 15-year journey in an industry I did not like, and an industry I wasn't passionate about. I guess it gave me skills like how to structure things, how to look at numbers. I was afforded the opportunity to work in Australia and in Scotland through it, but I was never passionate about it. And you fast forward, almost, 17 years after that, 2010. And, my father was always kind of sick when we were growing up, but he passed away, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. He was a bit more of a traditional man, didn't want kind of his eldest son to be, too close to it. My mother was a nurse, my sister was a scientist, so they were very involved in the process. So I actually went and, I wrote a book about football managers from when Ireland became a republic in 1953 right up to 2010. And I got picked up by Mercier Press, which was a traditional old school publishing house in Ireland, and very rare for a non-sports journalist to get picked up by them. But what I'd done actually was I peeled away the layers of the Irish football ecosystem by interviewing everybody from managers, their wives, family, players, all the way down. So created this, in hindsight, probably poorly written book, but to me it was this magical book. And I gave the money to the Kidney Association of Ireland, which was to honour my father in my way. And what was happening around that time was Facebook was coming up, Twitter was coming up as it was then, and what I realized was when writing a book is hard, selling a book is probably harder. So I went and studied communications. I went and studied digital marketing. I took an internship to learn all about digital marketing. I decided to quit the job in the middle of a recession with a young baby. And I can tell you, I wasn't popular at home doing that. But you kind of have to have a bit of belief in yourself, and I knew everything would be kind of all right. And yeah, it's kind of led on this probably crazy 14-year journey. those early decisions.
Yeah, it was interesting that you said you knew everything would be all right. And so many entrepreneurs just have that hardwired belief that they are going to be fine, that their idea is brilliant, that they're going to be all right, that their decisions are sound. And yeah, frequently they are. That's part of what makes them tick. But how often has that instinct, it's obviously led you to be very right in this instance, but would you ever challenge anybody to challenge that instinct when they're running a business in sport? Because sport's such a funny old sector. It can lead you astray. I mean, I've backed the wrong hunch before now. How do you sift when to back it, when not to back it?
Yeah, look, I mean, you don't know what good is until you've experienced bad. You don't know what a high is until you've seen a low. So, like, I have sat in the back garden while my family's been out of the house and gone, how am I going to pay everybody this month? How am I going to pay my mortgage? I have seen, you know, you know, an empty bank account, and I say empty with lots of reds and negatives in there. So, the journey it's not easy, and I think, any founder, you have to have belief in yourself if you're going to go on a journey. And I think that's inherent. And that's the 1% of everything. Just like you're a 1% of Premier League player, you back yourself, you believe yourself. That doesn't mean a Premier League player doesn't have a bad game. That doesn't mean a Premier League player doesn't have a controversial part of his life. But when you look back and reflect on that whole career, it works out okay. So I think that's the mindset you kind of have to have. And I think you have to kind of know in your kind of hearts of hearts that this is for you.
And when you first took that step into sports tech, what financially was your situation? What did you put in place to give yourself the best chance? Were you emptying your own personal savings? Where did the other money that you had come from? And how precarious a position was it at the very start?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, back in 2012 when I left, you were on a salary just under 100,000 euros. And my first year on my own, I think I took home 17,000. And you have savings. We were fortunate in that regard. We had, and we had, not that you want to rely on them too much, but we've good family behind us. That were willing to support the journey because they knew how passionate I was about it. And that my father was an entrepreneur. My mother always supported him, so I think she probably saw me as an extension of that, really. So um yeah, you're you're constantly running on fumes when you're getting up and started. I don't think it's great to say that I made 10 million, but I had 1 million starting. Entrepreneurs don't have that luxury. You're out there. You'll have something in the bank account that's close between 20, 25 to 50, maybe 100,000. That's your life savings, and you're kind of going, right, I trust myself to, rather than put this on a horse, I'm putting it on myself. I am the jockey.
That's really interesting that you chose that route, and particularly given your background in fund management, you must have had a very sophisticated understanding of the different ways you could set up and finance the business in the first instance. And I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs who say, all right, I've got capital, or yeah, I'm bootstrapping, but it's a view to my first round's going to be insert figure, 500,000, a million, whatever it is. What made you think, right, I'm going to because I'm assuming you self-funded for the first, what, year or two? What made you decide, right, I'm going to make this self-funded, I'll bootstrap, I'll fund it, as opposed to saying, right, I'll trying to build this on other people's money in the first instance. How did you come to that decision?
Yeah. I think you have to, if you're going to be a founder, you have to, kind of have to walk the walk, talk the talk. You have to. I mean, there's no magic wand where you meet an investor and they go, right, yeah, you fantastic, love your idea. Yeah, I like the fact you came from, a world of finance. Yeah, here you go. That doesn't happen, or if it does, it's very limited. I think you have to be able to tell the story of and look, everything, whether it's an investor chat, whether it's a brand chat, whether it's a sports IP right holder, everything's all about storytelling and the story and the personability of it. So I think you have to kind of be able to tell a story of, well, yeah, I was in finance, that was comfortable, I took myself out of that comfortable situation, and this is what I've done. And I remember, like, the when I kind of got out and kind of was first deciding my journey, actually, I went from every football club in the UK. So from A to W, I went from Arsenal to Woking. I had no ask. I wanted to understand what they were doing. I looked at what was growing in the States at the time, did my research. So you see the likes of, at the time, it was Daily Fantasy Sports. Um, my brother-in-law was a developer. We built out a concept for what was excuse me, a fantasy five game, a daily foot fantasy game. And on my own, I went and got a gambling license, in the UK. And, like, I've realized I can fill out forms very well. But, like, I didn't really have a clue, of what I was doing. I was kind of going, right, there's an opportunity here. These guys might come to the UK at some point. It turned out they did. They had to knock on the door. Um, but it's funny. I don't think having the background in fund management and finance actually helped me, other than giving me a work ethic and structure around it. So I didn't certainly know that I'd need numbers or looking at numbers. Before I came on to this podcast, I was sitting down with our accountant going through numbers, and I was actually thinking to myself, have I forgotten what numbers are? So yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Trev, you mentioned a moment ago that you've had moments where you've been in the garden with your head in your hands thinking, how on earth am I going to pay everybody? How am I going to pay my mortgage? I'm really interested in how you got to moments like that. So you start out, you have a concept that you believe in yourself. What is the first moment, the first real big significant thing where you think, oh dear, something financially isn't perhaps working as I thought it might?
Yeah, the minute you bring in other people into an entity, employees, like, uh, when you're going on a journey, like, your partner buys into what that journey is, so they get it, they know that it's going to be hard. But when you bring in other people, you know suddenly their mortgages, their family become an extension of your worries, because you don't want to let anybody ever be in a situation where they're struggling, or they're, and you do your best, with the information you have at all times, to make sure that doesn't happen, but the worry changes when it goes beyond your own circle.
Mm. Yeah, that's very true. And in that, I mean, I don't know an entrepreneur who hasn't had that experience. But in that development, what did you do to change it? And was there anything that you could have done not to arrived in that position in the first place?
Not to arrive in that position in the first place, that's something I think about a lot. But I think you have to, everything is part of a journey. I I don't think I would change any of it. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, a wonderful, wonderful thing. But every decision has been made with the best information that has been available at that time, and I can't change those decisions. And I don't necessarily know if I want to, because it's like when if you ever watched any movies, and they talk about the scars that they carry. And I'm thinking of movies like Lethal Weapon. Mel Gibson, he's got the scenery showing all his scars, and that. And I think these decisions are your scars, but they're also reminders, and when you get to that same situation in the future, you're empowered by what you did in that previous decision. So I don't think we need to be looking back and go, I would have done that differently.
And that's so interesting. And the point that you make about being in partnership, you've obviously got a brilliant partnership. You're building something really strong. But choosing partners, we all see partnerships set up in business, and you think, oh, I didn't see that one necessarily being the natural two natural bedfellows. What advice would you give to listeners about when to go into partnership, when to fly it alone, and what makes a partnership, particularly of equals, work? Because how do you make the buck stop with someone? And if you've got 50-50 say, you can reach a stalemate. What have you learnt in your through your business practices that could help other people navigate those? Because those can be such choppy waters.
Mm. Yeah. I think there's a couple of things actually when you break that down. I think when you work alongside somebody at that level, um, it's almost like a marriage. You have to trust the person. You have to be able to row with them, put that row to bed, and get up in the morning and go again. You have to be able to have honest chats. What I would say to anybody actually, that if they're going working with somebody, is do psychometric tests on each other. Myself and Sinead have done psychometric tests on each other to understand how we work together, our ways of working together, and what's important and values that we both, understand. And like myself and Sinead would have always said that we're yin and yang. We're actually yin and yin. We're very similar. We're both very competitive, but we both have found a way to complement each other. And I look back at maybe other co-founders I would have had who were incredible people, and it would have been great to understand ways of working, through psychometric testing. I also think you spend time together face to face, to have a dinner, but also have important meetings with whiteboards and kind of make sure that everything is aligned. And you know what? Like, she probably wouldn't like me saying this, but like, which Nate, even like, it felt like a courtship, because it took us about 7 months to decide, yeah, let's go into business together. And I don't think I could actually. I don't think I know I wouldn't have been able to do this with anybody else. So I think, if you're going to go into business, it has to be the right person. And I think to the point you made about staying on your own, if you want scale and you want investment, you need to be at least a 2-person startup team. And again, I know we're seeing a lot of AI startups moving very quickly. I think that's just more a FOMO piece rather than anything concrete, in that bubble at the moment. But if you're taking seriously and looking for investment, you need to be a minimum of 2-person founding team.
Mm. That that's interesting. I'm interested in. You've spoken a lot about the business side of it. I want to, if I may, dig into the products a little bit more. When you have something that you think, yeah, this is going to work, this is going to be something that industry will notice, will recognize the value of, will be keen on. Have you encountered any obstacles between, firstly, developing products and the length of time that can take and the financial challenges you have to navigate until you've got a product ready to go? And then secondly, when you then take it to industry and try and sell it, the difficulties there. And that can be, I slightly misjudged where the industry was, or it could be industry was in exactly the place I thought it was, but for some reason, and I still don't know why, people didn't bite as I thought they would.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's two parts to it. So I think in the first part, looking anecdotally, a couple of years ago, I was involved in a venture with Dr. Jag Basra. Fantastic, worked on the UEFA training courses, and was working with a lot of up and coming football coaches and football managers on psychometric testing actually, and more kind of your big five tests. And myself and Jag, came across each other. We were put in touch, and we thought this could be something that could really work in the scouting world. When you look at how players are scouted, and this exists right now, is you'll have a network of scouts. They'll go to games, and they will make notes about a player, and they will write up a report, and they'll email that report in. And then when it gets to the next stage, is they'll go talk to the coach, and with permission they'll talk to the players, parents, and then they'll talk to the player. And based on that, they'll make a decision. Yeah, this is a guy worth signing. And we looked at that and we was there, well, what if you could put a bit of science around this? And there was a company in the US called AIQ, the Athletic Intelligence Quotient, and fantastic Scott that was the founder of it. And they were doing these psychometric tests on, and they had this bank of information around NFL players. And they kind of had worked out a benchmark that if an athlete fell within this benchmark, he will have this type of career. So we felt we wanted to do something but we wanted to build it in to the scouting process. So, you would have an app platform that would, take away the paper, and you would have a psychometric report that, with the player's parents' permission, would be done by him. And we went to market and we chatted, and the feedback was, yeah, this is great. This is definitely something we'd use. But that was from executives in clubs. And then when we built the product, we had a partner that helped us build on it. And we got it into 9 clubs, everything from Crawley Town up to, we had Rangers, Burnley, we clubs like this, and they were using it. And what we found was the executive teams absolutely wanted it because they saw the value of data, they saw the value of testing players and understanding it. But we didn't talk to the right people, because when we got talking to scouts were they have a structure that there was full-time scouts within the thing, and then they had a sub network of scouts that were pen and paper merchants that were at games. And a lot of times these could be older guys that certainly weren't tech savvy. At the best of times they had a Nokia 6210 phone in their pocket, and we were expecting these guys to to be able to download an iPhone app and go through it. And it it was the biggest learning. And I remember when we got into one particular club, and we thought we were there. Yeah, this is we're in. This is Premier League Championship clubs. This is going to happen now. And they had talked about, if this works, they'd introduce us to other clubs, and and when we got in, they had this young, innovative scout actually, which fed down from the executive team. And we started, and within 3 weeks we were getting great feedback, on the product, and tweaking it, and using those learnings from the pilot. And then he decided he was leaving, and he was replaced by a veteran scout, we call it. And overnight the pilot was pulled, and you kind of you have to pick yourself up from that. And I suppose we've kind of said earlier on, I said, would you do anything differently? And I just kind of said, you have to do the journey you do. But I think in that instance, it's probably one where we probably should have focused more on the end user, rather the executive team and what they wanted.
To that end, Trev, I'm coming into the sports sector. You obviously knew it very well, and the fact that you've written about it, and you've had different entrepreneurial experiences within it. It's always amazing to people coming in that sector complexity, and also the sector can be pretty siloed, in that it's amazing how often people you would expect to be speaking to each other frankly don't. Uh, what are the particular nuances of sport that have really struck you, as, rather than just being a fan, being a business person within that environment?
Yeah, you look at it from a fan and you kind of think, yeah, I want to work on this. This is super. This is amazing. And it's almost, as sport as a person, you don't meet your hero, because when you look at a football club, football obviously being the biggest sport is just so focused on operational performance. That everything is about the players and the players come first. And I think, if you're building something in a fan engagement perspective, and we just take that silo for a second, a lot of the times the clubs just don't have the budget. That makes it hard to go into a club and kind of go, right, we have an amazing piece of technology here. And the club immediately goes, well, we'll absolutely give you a platform to use your technology. So speaking with clubs can be very hard, I think, for a founder. And I think it can be very eye-opening when they go in to speak to them to kind of go, actually, our focus here is on signing these players and paying their wages.
If it's okay, I just wanted to go back to the moment you said that you had that product, you maybe should have focused a bit more on the end user, but you thought you were going to get people biting on it. It didn't end up working out. When the investment didn't come in, or rather when the buyers didn't come through the door, I'm just interested in the effect that had on you, the business, maybe anyone else who was working for you. Financially, what were the consequences of that not working out?
Ultimately, that business didn't succeed. I'm sure Jag would attest to this as well. But like we were close to significant investment, based on those pilots. The two biggest ones were kind of falling through. We weren't getting the kind of the user traction that we needed, and I think, ultimately, it's that business failed, and we had to kind of dust ourselves up. We'd been accepted into an accelerator, program, which had gotten funding. We yeah, we probably just have to there's a phrase you kind of have is fail fast, and we use it a lot in what we do right now. And I think, that was one of the instances where we kind of took a step back and said, look, we're putting a lot of effort in here. We've got this wrong. Like, the industry's not ready. Executives are, but the industry's not. And let's just make the decision to fold this, and that's, sometimes you can be, certainly a lot of founders can be accused of dragging something out and failing to maybe put the sword in. But I actually think that Jag and myself in that instance, we were pretty ruthless in what needed to be done. And as hard as it was, and like, as I caught up with Jag recently, and she actually, the learnings she took from that business, like, she's just hasn't had an exit of her own. So it again, it's the building of the character. It was the right thing to do with the information at that time, as hard as that was. But like, Alex, I want to make one point, and I think it's a point for everybody. There will be times in somebody's life where they don't know if they will be able to pay or do bills or do anything. For a hard working person with the right attitude, there is always work, Alex. There is always work. If you have the right attitude, and if you don't let your ego get in the way, you'll actually be all right. You'll be all right. Yeah, it will be tough, but you'll be all right.
So, Trev, when you had that situation where you had the business, you call time on it, how did you dust yourself off, recenter, and start again? Did your confidence take a break, or did you think, no, I'm the right person, that just wasn't the right initiative?
Yeah. So, look, I'll share something I've kind of never shared really before, but like, and I think we're all a bit neurodiverse. I'm a bit neurodiverse. I'm actually very hard on myself on a daily basis, and you know, I'm always questioning myself, and I'm always, going, oh, why did you do that, or what did you do in those situations? So it's natural, to then when something bad like that happens, to kind of go, and be extra tough on yourself, and probably I'm doing that level of toughness on myself a disservice, partners and family would probably say, God, he can be, I can be quite challenging and quite tense. And I know that. But I guess for me, you know, on top of that, I do a lot of personal work, you know, life coaches. I do a lot of work with business coaches. You know, I would urge anybody that's going to be a founder, and particularly if they've won that with an exit coming up, that not that I do, but um, go to counseling, go to a psychologist, you know, and you know, prepare yourself because what, like, you know, it, if you get to a situation where a business fails, okay, that's like the equivalent of a marriage failing or the loss of a child. Not in, and I don't want to play down, sorry, what a marriage failing or loss of a child is, but it is a sense of grief, you know, and you have to have the skills to manage that. And I think likewise, if you're about to sell a business, people probably don't realize that, you know, selling a business, it's actually letting go of something you've built from scratch. So you have to be mentally have the tools available to be able to deal with that. And I think, you know, I've probably realized that more so over time. I do a lot of breath work. I do a lot of work on myself. Um, excuse me. What I did back then was ran. I turned into a mini Forrest Gump, or a larger Forrest Gump. I'm sure Tom Hanks is probably slimmer than me, but I used to go for running every day, and I'd run until my brain felt tired. And that's then when my brain felt tired, I knew that, do you know what, I can take a mini break here now.
Interesting, yeah. And I'm really fascinated on a on a couple of occasions you've talked about the sort of the psychological element of running a business and handling the finances of it. Earlier you said that you did psychometric tests, you and your business partner, and just now you said, you know, I'd recommend doing tests and getting counselling and maybe doing psychological tests on yourself, maybe at the outset of a business, so that you know you're psychologically prepared. Do you think that element of it, the mind side of financially running a business and being prepared to do what needs to be done, or handling things that come at you from left field, that side of it is underappreciated by people who are getting into startups and they're just focusing on the product or something else, and actually they could be focusing on their own minds more?
100%, 100%. I think, yeah, I imagine you'll get somebody listening to this that, you know, that is in an office and they're probably thinking about going into that. And like, even in your own, and we've all worked in different environments, you know the feeling when you get when a boss says to you, can you come into my office for a minute? Okay. And you don't know what that conversation is about, and your head spirals. Am I getting sacked? Am I done something wrong? You know? Well, yeah, that's every day in an entrepreneur life, you know, because you're going to get an email going, you know, no, we don't want to work with you. No, the time's not right now. No, we don't have a budget. You know, and like it's you're getting a lot of no's, so you have to be able to deal, you know, with that. And like, you know, I think over time, you know, time is a great friend, but, you know, you kind of learn to go, okay, well, you know, no's are okay, you know, and, but when you're starting out, and particularly, you know, if you're a bit younger, maybe, or not that that always means the case either, but, you know, a no could be a devastating thing because you built this product, you had this baby, you want the world to use it, you know, and somebody's just said, actually, no, we don't need it, or we can't afford it, or it's not for us. And that's a hard take, you know, that's, you know, just like nobody wants to go up to a pram and roll it back and say, oh my God, that's an ugly baby. You know, everybody wants to think that their child is perfect, and business is no different.
Yeah. And to that point, when you kind of go through the development of the business and the expansion, you've said about how important a partner is, um, but we've talked about the importance of people around you, the complexity of the sports sector. When you expand, not so much with the recruitment, but when you start to develop a board or a series of advisors, how do you recommend other entrepreneurs go about getting the right people about them to, because that shift from start up to stay up to scale up, the business changes exponentially at each stage. How do you recruit at the top level to support you as the founder? And almost at what point do you realize my work here is done, it's time to leave it to others?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I haven't got to the point yet where I've had to make the decision of my work here is done. So I will be very interested when that comes my way, actually, how that manifests out. But to the first point, like, for the most part, entrepreneurs, they have a very much, they're curious, they have a growth mindset, and they're driven. So when you're looking for, a board or an advisory board, you're looking for somebody that you can learn from, somebody that will, elevate your knowledge and your status, potentially in network, but certainly your knowledge, because you want to be able to grow and learn from them. And I think these guys have got to the very top of their business. They pushed themselves. They're amazing people. That and if you're willing to listen, they will give you some amazing insights.
Do you know what? That feels like as good a place as any to land. So, Trev, thank you so much for speaking to us. It's been fascinating to get your insight and your advice. I'm sure people listening to this will have memories flooding back based on what you said, or maybe have a clearer vision for the future of their startup. So thank you very much.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, as well. I hope that was okay for you guys. So thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that conversation with Trev and that it's given you some food for thought.
The STA Group exists to be the link between suits, tracksuits, lab coats and wallets. Thank you again to our sponsor, Sports Tech HQ, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.